Golf visual.
Yankee Golf, thanks. CSEN 3000.
3000 Yankee Golf.
Hello, you're watching a video brought to you by the Aviation Community YouTube channel. If you like what you see, please consider subscribing. And while we have your attention, please consider following our Twitter. The link is in the description. Sit back and enjoy the video.
Hello, welcome one and all to episode 3 of the Aviation Community Podcast. Today you got myself, Aaron, and joining me is David. Welcome, David.
Aaron, it's good to join you again on Aviation Community Podcast episode 3. How's it going on your end?
Yeah, it's been a good week. Good, lots of sunshine, a bit of except for rain yesterday, but plenty of days out at the airport viewing aircraft. Yourself?
Yeah, very much the same actually. Very uncommon for Britain, but a week of sunshine, a week of seeing loads and loads of beautiful general aviation aircraft flying above me. So, you know, all's good, all's well that ends well, and
yeah, famous Wallace and Gromit comment like that.
exactly. So I'll start off with the quiz question for today, actually, just to keep our viewers entertained. So, what airline is the world's largest purchaser of caviar?
Yes, and the answer will be at the end of the podcast, and it might not be an airline you're expecting. So, on today's podcast, the stories of the week, we look into United Airlines going supersonic, a Typhoon cloaked in the Union Jack, and we ask whether the Australia-New Zealand travel bubble is about to get bigger, and Boeing and Alaska Airlines partner to make flying safer and more sustainable. So our first story, United Airlines orders supersonic jets with the company we talked about last week, Boom Supersonic.
That's right, last week we spoke about Boom's supersonic jet, and United Airlines said it would buy 15 of Boom's Overture aircraft once they meet United's safety, operating and sustainability requirements. They've also put in an option for a further 35 aircraft. So one of the issues that's happened is that supersonic aircraft have come under criticism from environmentalists for burning more fuel per passenger than comparable subsonic planes. And United has basically pledged to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 100% by 2050. And they said that they'd do this by using sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, from the point at which these jets enter into service, which is expected to be in 2029. The Overture aircraft are basically expected to have 65 to 88 seats. I think we said this last week, actually.
Yeah.
And they're going to be priced at business class fares, but are expected to cut transatlantic flying by half.
Yeah, so this is just going to be a modern version of the Concorde to start off with, it sounds like. Be interesting what prices they do come out. As I say, the higher end of business class prices / first class. I'm expecting just because of the number of seats on board the flights.
Yeah, definitely. I can't see how a transatlantic flight or even a transcontinental flight would actually be sustainable with so few seats at any reasonable or low cost. I can only imagine it being a first class only flight, something like what British Airways used to do from London City to JFK, which was operating Embraer. No, sorry, it's an Airbus A319 actually, but in business class only configuration.
Yeah.
So very few seats, but very high margins.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, and this is probably your favorite story of the week. Eurofighter Typhoon in Union Jack livery.
Indeed, this was a great story. So the Eurofighter Typhoon, which will be based at RAF Coningsby, which is in Lincolnshire, was unveiled to the public on Friday, the 28th of May. So that's last Friday, after 6 months of paintwork. It basically has a new standout colour scheme of red, white and blue depicting the Union flag to champion patriotism for the United Kingdom. It's actually got a really cool name, and it's called Anarchy 1, and can climb up to 10,000 feet, as well as actually fly at 600 miles an hour, just 100 feet from the ground. Obviously, this isn't going to be used for military purposes. I can't see any appeal of
No,
using
definitely
a
not.
very brightly coloured aircraft, but it will be used for air shows, both the 2021 and 2022 seasons, since of course 2020 season of air shows was cancelled. But it's going to take the term flying the flag to a whole new level.
It's good to see all these air shows coming back as well. Get to see crowds and get to see these aircraft once again flying.
Yes, definitely. Have you been to any air shows, Aaron?
Yes, only ones in here. We have the Avalon Air Show down in Victoria. That's every 2 years, so I'm not sure when the next one is due. But I think I went on Fanbar was on when I was in the UK, but I didn't know at the time, so I missed it. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to it.
Oh no, that's unfortunate. I mean, I've never been to Farnborough, but it is one of the many that I want to go to when they're back. I also really want to go to the Paris Air Show. That looks
Yeah,
pretty awesome.
I think just any air show at the moment will be good to see. We've got a big one in Brisbane. They call it the Brisbane Air Show, but it's like an hour and a half drive west of us to a little airfield. So I think we'll be going to that one.
Nice, and that one's on this year, is it?
Yeah, that one's on in only in a couple of months. Thank goodness. So, can't wait.
Ah, nice, very good. And what sorts of aircraft have they typically got? Is it military? Is it civilian?
It'll be the military, but the military won't be landing. I don't think it's only a small airfield, so they'll just be flying over. But Amberley, the Air Force Base isn't too far away, so you'll have warbirds and that are like at the air show, which is good.
Excellent. That sounds fantastic. Actually, since we're talking about Australia, is it worth going straight into
The next story? Australia New Zealand travel bubble is about to increase in size.
Indeed, or is it? That's the question. So the prospects of a travel bubble covering Australia, New Zealand, and Pacific Island nations have been kicked around for some time. However, at this moment, only two travel bubbles exist: those between Australia and New Zealand and the Cook Islands. Sorry, those between Australia and New Zealand, and between the Cook Islands and New Zealand. But this week, or rather, yeah, this week actually, the idea of a travel bubble covering all of the Southwest Pacific countries have received a fresh burst of life. The two-way travel bubble between Australia and New Zealand began on the 19th of April and has been more or less successful. There's been a few snags, obviously, with Victoria in particular, but most of those snags have been temporary. At the moment, both Australia and New Zealand are open to expanding its travel bubble to include certain Pacific Island nations. And owing to the isolation of most of these nations, they've basically dodged the COVID-19 bullet. So countries like Fiji, the Cook Islands, New Caledonia, and Vanuatu are also highly tourist dependent and basically would benefit quite a bit from tourism from Australia and New Zealand.
Yes, hopefully this goes ahead because this will also mean that cruise ships will get back going to the Pacific Islands. And I've got friends in Fiji and they've struggled really badly. Like they've actually had to go back to like fishing and catching, hunting to actually like put food on the table. So because they're like really tourism dependent there in Fiji. So some of those Pacific Island countries have been struggling really badly.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine that. I mean, Scott Morrison said that the Pacific is our family, which is quite a powerful thing to say. And Jacinda Ardern also said, well, that she wants to keep the option open and available. But one of the other interesting points is that the airlines that would benefit actually are the airlines from the Pacific nations, the Pacific Islands, rather than Qantas or Air New Zealand, quite possibly because I mean they've got bigger, sort of wider catchment areas or wider networks, whereas Fiji Airways, for example, or Air Cannon from New Caledonia, or even Air Vanuatu would probably. I imagine a lot of their flights are to New Zealand and Australia and the other
Yeah,
Pacific
that's
Islands.
correct. Yes, so they'll definitely benefit much more than Virgin, Qantas, and New Zealand.
Excellent. That's pretty sweet, and I hope for your sake as well that this
Yes,
opens up so
hopefully
you
we
can
can travel. I can't wait.
yes,
Get out of Brisbane. Can't wait to get back to Fiji. Love it.
yes, exactly. Even within Australia, are the state borders open, or is it?
Everywhere but Victoria at the moment. I think I'm not sure how much of Victoria. Maybe it's just Melbourne. So yeah, Melbourne's shut down due to COVID cluster going on down there at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully this is all resolved and we can again travel. Hopefully we don't need travel bubbles in too long.
Yeah, and hopefully, so short haul internationals the next couple of months, and then long hauls back to Europe, hopefully, in not too long.
Yeah, I do like what you call a short haul international. How long is the flight from Brisbane to Fiji?
Brisbane, Fiji is three hours. That's probably
Okay.
the closest. Yeah, and to get to the Cook Islands, you have to fly to New Zealand and then to the Cook Islands. There's no direct flights to the Cook Islands. Yeah, so that's a three, and then there's another probably 4 hours to the Cook Islands. Plus your stopover ends up being like a 12-hour flight.
At which point you could also be in Singapore.
Singapore, 12 hours, you pass way past Singapore. Yeah, it's only 8 hours to Singapore from Brisbane.
Yeah, that's right. I should know this actually. Um, I mean, Sydney's a fair bit further, but I did fly from Singapore to Sydney just over a year ago. Ah,
Yeah.
the dream, being able to fly.
There were the days.
Indeed, indeed.
So
But yeah,
getting onto it, this week's incident report was a pilot incapacitation involving a Cessna 208B Cessna Caravan, Victor Hotel, Delta Quebec Papa, near Brisbane Airport back in last year.
that's right. So on the afternoon of the 2nd of July 2020, the pilot of a Cessna 208B aircraft, which was registered Victor Hotel, Delta Quebec Papa, was conducting a ferry flight from Cairns to Redcliffe, which is in Queensland. After encountering unforecast icing conditions and poor visibility due to cloud, the pilot climbed from 10,000 feet to 11,000 feet. When the aircraft was about 53 kilometers west-northwest of Sunshine Coast Airport, air traffic control attempted to contact the pilot regarding the descent into Redcliffe. No response was received from the pilot at the time, or for the next 40 minutes. During this time, the aircraft control, with the assistance of pilots from nearby aircraft, made further attempts to contact the pilot of Victor Hotel Delta Quebec Papa. When the aircraft was about 111 kilometers south-southeast of the intended destination, the pilot woke and communications re-established. The pilot was instructed by air traffic control to land at Gold Coast Airport, and so tracked to the Gold Coast Airport and landed safely without further incident. The ATSB found that the pilot was likely experiencing a level of fatigue due to inadequate sleep the night before, and also leading up to the incident. Further, operating at 11,000 feet with intermittent use of supplemental oxygen likely resulted in the pilot experiencing mild hypoxia. So this is one of the issues that likely exacerbated the pilot's existing fatigue and contributed to him falling asleep.
Yes, with this report, I can actually remember listening to this and watching it live happen on, I think it was Flight Radar or ADSB Exchange. First noticed this weird aircraft movements at around Brisbane, like away one of the RAAF Air Force planes was flying, and then I got onto the air traffic control, and they were trying to contact this pilot. And when he came to, He really did sound out of it, and he wanted. I'll put up a picture for the podcast of Brisbane airspace and the distance between Redcliffe and the Gold Coast, which is only 63 nautical miles. And he wanted to fly back to Redcliffe, but he was directed to land just by the way he was talking, he was slurring his words, and it just sounded really tired and just not with it. So he finally agreed to land at the Gold Coast.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. I mean, how did he sort of get into the plane if he was incapacitated? Do you reckon
From
it started?
Cairns to Brisbane in a normal jet, 2.5 hours. So this one must have been like a 6-hour plus flight. So yeah, he must have been really tired and sit on autopilot for that long.
Yeah, I imagine it's not particularly thrilling, and it was a ferry flight as well.
Yeah, so there was nothing in the aircraft he had to worry about.
Yeah, and he was on his own, so no one to talk to.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, that's pretty. I find I've watched a lot of documentaries about pilots, particularly cargo pilots as well, and just always thought that a lot of them do wind up flying on their own, and that must be pretty tough, pretty isolating as well.
Yeah, and yeah, you're the only one to fix something if something goes wrong.
Yeah, exactly. It's everything. The buck stops at you.
So yeah, moving on to our next story, our final story of tonight. Boeing and Alaska Airlines partner to make flying safer and more sustainable.
That is correct. Boeing and Alaska Airlines announced that they're going to partner on the latest Boeing Eco Demonstrator program, and they're going to test about 20 technologies on a new 737-9 to enhance the safety and sustainability of air travel. So for flights beginning this summer, or winter for Australia, Boeing and Alaska will test a new halon-free fire extinguishing agent that effectively reduces the effects on the ozone layer. They also will evaluate an engine nacelle designed to reduce noise and assess cabin sidewalls made of recycled material, among other projects. So I think that's actually quite interesting. The halon-free fire extinguisher is quite good because I don't know if you remember this as well, but do you remember in sort of the late 90s, early 2000s, where everyone was concerned about CFCs and depleting the ozone layer?
Yeah, and yeah, they had fire extinguishers had something bad in them that they got rid of.
Yeah, which is halon, which is actually 10 times worse than the chlorofluorocarbons. I think actually 10 times worse. I'm not actually just saying this. So I suppose it's probably a good thing that fire extinguishers on aeroplanes don't get used very much.
No, yeah, that's fire on flight. I'm trying to use an extinguisher. I'm assuming they're talking about engine extinguishers on the planes, not little personal ones inside the airplanes. They're talking about changing.
Yeah, I think they are talking about the engine extinguishers. I mean, probably also I think they've removed halon from the personal red ones. But yeah, it is the engine extinguishers that they're referring to.
Anything that's more sustainable is going to help us in the long run. And it's good to see airlines partnering up with Boeing to get this done. Sort of the guinea pigs, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose I don't really know much about Alaska or Air Alaska or Alaska Airlines, or it could just be Alaska, as in the airline could just be Alaska. I don't know very much about this airline or Alaska for that matter, but I mean, do you have any insight into this? into the airline.
I just know they got really good mileage points. That's all I know. Alaska Airlines, and you can buy. They got really cheap to buy their points as well, and you can use them on various airlines that partnered with. That's about my things that I know about Alaska Airlines.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I've never been to Alaska. It's far too cold for me. But the Eco Demonstrator program that Boeing is doing, they've actually been doing quite a few other things. So on the 737 MAX, they've used advanced technology winglets, which are meant to reduce fuel use and emissions. They've also added new iPad apps to provide real-time weather and other data to pilots so that they can make adjustments to reduce CO2 emissions and improve fuel efficiency. This is an interesting one. There's a camera system on the new 777X to enable pilots to avoid obstacles on the ground. So I actually thought that this existed already, but it apparently not.
Yeah, the A380's got one in the tower, but it might just be up to the airlines if they put them in or not. I would assume.
Yeah, okay, because that makes sense. Cause I can't imagine someone taxiing an A380 without any aids, because I mean, the size of that thing.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, that's the end of our podcast, and we only have one thing left, and that's the answer to our quiz, which was, what airline is the world's largest purchaser of caviar?
And surprisingly, it is not one of the Gulf carriers. It is actually Lufthansa, which ordered 10 tons, or rather, which orders over 10 tons of caviar every year.
Yes, that's a lot of caviar, and that surprised me. I was definitely thinking Emirates, Qatar, one of those airlines.
Yeah, that is exactly what I was thinking as well. But apparently not. It's Lufthansa, so that's where you need to go if you want to have some caviar in the skies.
Righto, so that brings the draw to the close of our podcast. I'd like to thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you, Dave, and enjoy work for today.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Good to join you again, and have a good night where you are, and a good weekend.
Okay, bye all.
Bye bye.